We are sitting in the Folsom Tavern, which is part of the American Independence Museum here on our campus. It was built to impress, and it is a very impressive building. It was started 1773, finished in 1775, just a few months before Exeter became the capital of New Hampshire during the Revolutionary War. It was built by Colonel Samuel Folsom. He fought in the French and Indian War, but he did not fight during the Revolutionary War, but he was a very significant influence during that war. It was located right in the center of town, so when you came in, it was the first thing you saw. It has a New England Georgian townhouse facade on it, and it has a hip roof, which is very rare for the north, actually. You see it much more in the south. It also was built as what they called a double house, which means that it has a center hallway, a center stairwell in it, and two chimneys. It was Samuel's grandfather who had a tavern that was located around the corner, actually on Water Street, that burned in 1768. So there's a family history to that, which I found was interesting. And it had the most beautiful view also of the Squamscott River, because none of the buildings were down on Water Street, and so that was where the harbor was, and it was a beautiful setting. So 1783, the Society of Cincinnati was actually formed and organized here. It was chosen for that, and again because it was also an upper class location. The same retired, or many retired officers from the Revolutionary War that wanted to be remembered for their participation in our independence and liberty. 1789, George Washington came through town. It was quite a much shorter visit than the community was anticipating, but he did have breakfast here, and he did have breakfast in the front parlor, which has been documented. And they wanted him to stay for dinner and a little bit more celebration, but he had to go on. But there's an interesting aside to when he left too, and this was witnessed by one of the gentlemen that accompanied Washington from town, out of town, as his carriage was leaving. And apparently they reached the top of High Hill, and he asked the carriage driver to stop, and he looked back at Exeter and thought that it was quite a lovely landscape. He commented on that, which I think is very interesting. And he did comment in his diaries too, on the different places that he stayed, including Exeter. The tavern has been moved 3 times, which again makes it extremely interesting and also amazing that we have ended up with this really beautiful building. In 1860, Front Street was expanded. So when they did that, they just had to move the tavern a little bit back and a little bit to the side, which is what they did, but they elevated it also. And at that point, they built underneath of the tavern. There was a restaurant, and you could buy tickets for the train, et cetera, et cetera. So it was there until 1929, when Standard Oil made an offer for the land, not the building. And so the building at that point was sold to the Society of Cincinnati, keeping in mind the fact that this is where they were founded. And it was moved just a couple of streets over to Spring Street, which is right now the west side of where we're sitting. And so then in 2004, it was determined that it should be relocated to a point or a place on Water Street of prominence, which is what it had before, which is around the corner from Spring Street. So it wasn't a major move. But again, it was significant. And then from that move, it was restored, and by 2007, beautifully restored, I have to say. And by 2007, it was open again, as a tavern. So the society has had definitely an association with this whole property. While they did continue to actually acquire property, which made it possible when they did move the tavern in 2004 to have this wonderful location on Water Street. And yes, they do continue to have an annual meeting here, very significant to them. They really are committed to the integrity of the tavern and also to sharing it with the community and certainly with the state, and given its incredible historic value to the American Revolution.